Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of the Islamic podcast. Quite a while ago, one of my subscribers actually recommended that I respond to an atheist apologist, a YouTube channel by the name of Logicked.
Who?
I saw him attacking Zakir Naik.
I'm actually your favorite. I'm an atheist.
There's no problem, Akhi, as long as you are not interested in paradise and have no problem in going to hell, you have no problem.
I figured that, you know what, let me take a look.
Doctor, sales manager from shipping company.
Anyway, when I was first exposed to these after I watched the first few of them, the openings of them started to feel really odd, and that's because everyone introduces themselves by their occupation. I just thought I'd point out that it feels really odd to me. I don't know if it's a cultural difference. It's very sort of worker bee-ish, very drone-like, to identify yourself not by your name, but by your position as a salesman.
I mean, like, not everybody wants to dress up like a bank robber and then, conceal or hide their identity, unlike you.
Is the hell and paradise are there? How as a common person I believe. I don't believe in any religion.
So are hell and paradise real? What reason is there for a common person like me to believe this? I don't believe in any religion, is the question.
For example, you go to a forest. You are going to a forest the first time. You don't know whether the fruits are poisonous or not. If you start eating any fruit, you may end up eating a fruit which is poisonous and you may die. What do? You ask an expert.
Well, I suppose that depends on your definition of expert. I mean, you don't really need an expert, especially if you have an entire society that's been living in that forest for millennia. If a child goes out into that forest, pretty much anyone older with a bit more experience living in that world with knowledge of the consequences will be able to provide advice, at least. Sometimes they might be wrong. I don't know if they count as an expert necessarily, but at the very least they can say, no, that berry, that's poisonous. And the reason they can say that is because someone got poisoned, not because they asked an
So I guess we shouldn't go to the expert. So if you're sick, you should treat yourself, I guess.
Well, had a heart attack. Have a drink, cigarette, cup of coffee. Back in the game.
If you get into an accident and you lose a leg, too bad. Saw it yourself. don't need an expert. I don't like why he makes this point. I feel like he's nitpicking for the sake of nitpicking. That's not a point that atheists disagree on. If you have an issue, you should go to an expert. I don't know, what's the issue here? I mean, is he really saying that you shouldn't go to an expert if you have problems? And what is ironic is that later on, he says that, you don't need an expert. You can just ask someone who has a lot of experience. But someone who has a lot of experience is an expert. What does he think an expert is? So here he's committing the passive inconsistency. He's just contradicting himself and being inconsistent. At one point, he's saying that, you don't need an expert. You just need someone with a lot of experience. But someone with a lot of experience is an expert. So he's saying that you don't need an expert. You just need an expert. That's a self-contradictory.
When you are sick, who do you go to? The doctor is an expert in treating sickness, correct?
Well, wait a minute now. Why would I go to a doctor? Is there something wrong with being sick? I'm not sure I buy that. This seems very much like you're relying on subjective preferences. What expert did you ask about this?
You can't say I am a human being. I will treat myself.
Well, yeah, you can. Of course you can say that. Depending on the illness, it might not work. Then again, depending on the illness, it might work to an extent. I mean, that's what people used to do in the old days. Granted, they didn't exactly have controlled studies to show them what actually works and what doesn't at a rate better than placebo. But again, at the very least, they survived through to the end. Jokes aside, the human species survived. And not only survived, but devised all of medical science, learned literally everything the doctors know from scratch, so that now there are experts that you can ask. And we did all of that with no experts to ask. Pretty impressive, if I do say so myself. Good job, humans. I think we might just figure this life thing out yet.
Have a drink, cigarette, cup of coffee. Back in the game.
Is he actually saying you don't need to go to an expert? What point does he think he's making? That's incredibly stupid. So, like I said, if someone comes and robs your house, don't go to the cops, right? Don't go to the detectives, don't go to the cops, fix it yourself. Try to find the guy who robbed you, and then try to go with a gun, I guess, and then take your things back from him. Go into wage a war. Does he want people to go back to tribalism? I don't understand his point. So Yeah, so basically, he's committing what is in logic, what is known as the false authority fallacy. First of all, you are not an authority on everything, okay? Like, for example, yeah, sure, when it comes to small things, right? Like, for example, if you wanna, like, I don't know, like, eat in a fancy restaurant or not, that's a decision you can make for yourself. But when it comes to bigger decisions, most people would agree that you don't just make those decisions by yourself. For example, when it comes to medicine, when it comes to, I don't know, crime, or when it comes to politics, or any kind of like major decisions, you should go to an expert. Why? Because expert opinions, when you follow opinion of experts, usually that works better than when you follow your own opinion, right? But imagine I'm sick, right? And I have two options, right? I can stay home and try to treat myself, or I can go to a doctor. Now, if I stay home and I try to treat myself, my chance of getting better is less than if I go to a doctor, because a doctor has equipments, they have more knowledge. It logically follows that when you have more knowledge about something, your ability to solve problems that falls within the scope of your knowledge is higher than when you don't have any knowledge and you just try to figure that out. Same thing here. Like, for example, if you're sick, chances are that you yourself wouldn't be able to treat the sickness because you're not an authority here. Like, it logically follows. Like, what's the issue here? Like, I don't know. Like, I think he's trying to nitpick Zakir Naik for the sake of nitpicking Zakir Naik instead of actually making any kind of valid point. I mean, like, sure, on some things you don't really need an expert, but like, to say that like you don't need an expert, period, that's a very bad advice, actually.
The Quran says in Surah Nahl chapter 16 verse 43 and Surah Anbiya chapter 20 verse number 7, if you don't know, ask the person who's expert.
No, it really doesn't. It does not say, if you don't know something, go and ask someone who's developed the relevant expertise through a lot of study, who's studied reality in depth and the actual consequences of actions through experiments and observation. No, it's just more ranting from Muhammad about why you have to believe him when he tells you stuff. Say, my Lord knows every word spoken in the heavens and on earth. He is the one that hears and knows all things. Nay, they say, these are medleys of dreams. Nay, he forged it. Nay, he is but a poet. Let him then bring us a sign like the ones that were sent to prophets of old. As to those before them, not one of the populations which we destroyed believed. Will these believe? And then here's verse 7, the one he actually mentions, but conveniently doesn't quote, because he's in the middle of saying that this says something it doesn't say. Before you also the messengers we sent were but men, to whom we granted inspiration. If you do not realize this, ask of those who possess the message. See, we're not talking about experts here. We're not talking about doctors who studied medicine. We're talking about people who just claimed they speak for God, and that's it. Indistinguishable from everyone else who also did the same thing.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Like, this guy is so stupid. Like, this is what I knew, that this guy have no idea what the hell he's talking about, and he have no idea how to interpret the Quran. First of all, the verse has nothing to do with the Prophet. Okay, the verse is not addressing the people to listen to the Prophet. I don't know where he got this from. So basically, this is what the verse says, right? Quran 16:43, it says, and we sent not before you except men to whom we revealed our message. So as the people of message, if you do not know. And then the next verse says the following, Quran 21:7, and we sent not before you, O Muhammad, except men to whom we revealed the message. So as the people of message, i.e. Former people of scripture, if you do not know. Now, what was the context that these verses were revealed in? Well, if you read Tafsir of Ibn Kathir, this is what it says. So ask the people of reminder if you do not know. Meaning, ask the people of knowledge among the nations such as Jews and Christians. So basically, when these verses were revealed, it was revealed in the context of some Arabs denying the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad, on the basis that they believe that, if God does send a prophet or messengers, then those messengers will not be human. And they had no logical justification for this. So the Quran basically rebukes their position and says that no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he sent prophets who were human beings. Like, the prophets were not like some kind of magical being or angels. And then he tells them that ask the Jews and Christians to confirm this, right? Because Jews and Christians would know better because it's their own religion on this matter, right? So yeah, this verse has nothing to do with following the prophet. I don't know where to get this from. So that's point number one. Point number two, here he's begging the question fallacy. He has a premise that is completely unjustified. He just assumed that these are rantings of the prophet. Like, what's your evidence for this? Like, what's your evidence that the Prophet ﷺ himself is making this up? That the verse is saying that you should go to an expert. Because what is the context here? The context is that, let's say that, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Muslims to confirm something from people who know better than them, right? And that's a general rule. That's a general rule in Islam, right? When you don't know something, you should go ask an expert. And the thing is that when you're interpreting the Quran, you don't just interpret in isolation or out of like context. Because the thing is that in terms of how we should understand rulings from the Quran, we look at the whole picture. We don't just take like one passage and try to interpret it in itself. We try to look at Quran as a whole, and then we try to interpret it, right? For example, there's a verse in the Quran, Quran chapter 4, verse 59, where it says the following: O you who believed, obey Allah and obey the Messenger, and those in authority among you. And if you disagree over anything, refer it to Allah and the Messenger. If you should believe in Allah and the last day. This is the best and best in result. Quran chapter 4, 59. So from this verse, we learn that we have to follow the Prophet. Now, what did the Prophet say about knowledgeable people?
By the way, there is a Sahih hadith where the Prophet said if anyone travels on a road in search of knowledge, Allah will cause him to travel on one of the roads of paradise, which means he clearly told people to seek knowledge. From this we can say the following: the Quran tells us to listen to the Prophet tells us to seek knowledge. Therefore, in order to seek knowledge, we have to ask the experts.
So yeah, this is like a general rule. And this is the thing, like when you're reading the Quran, you have to take the whole thing, whole Islam as a whole, or Islamic scriptures as a whole into account before you make a verdict. You don't just take like one verse and then make some kind of ruling out of it. That's not how Islam works. Or that's not how religious deduction works. So we have a clear Islamic guidelines that we should listen to experts, right? So when we use this and we interpret that other verse, and we see that the other verse is also saying the same thing. So here it's also saying the same thing, which is that if you don't know something, you should verify it from people who know better than you. And this is why the verse 1643, it says, so ask the people of message if you do not know, which means that if you don't know something, go ask experts. And so when Zakir Naik says that, that you should ask this verse means that you should ask the expert, this is a general verdict and well established in Islam and Islamic law. And yeah, he's correct. Like there's no mistake here. Like he's not wrong. His interpretation of this verse is not wrong. Your interpretation is wrong because you're only taking this verse and interpreting it in isolation, where he is interpreting it by using other sources or looking at the whole picture instead of just this one thing. Now, someone could object to this and say that, but this is only talking about religious knowledge, right? Now, the thing is that, yes, it is talking about religious knowledge, but religious knowledge back then meant something completely different than religious knowledge now. Because religious knowledge back then encompassed everything, okay? Which it meant geography, it meant history, it meant, mathematics, it meant chemistry, it means physics, it means science as a whole. So religious knowledge wasn't just in general, like things that go along with Quran and Sunnah. So religious knowledge was extremely vast. So the definition of what constituted religious knowledge was extremely massive. So when they're talking about religious knowledge, they're not just talking about a few things here and there, like how to worship and this and that. And the Prophet, he told people how to rule. He told people how to eat, how to fast, how to wage war, how to tackle politics, like everything. Again, this is talking about, you have to understand that Islam is a way of life and that covers everything. Now, the reason why learning is important is because in Islam we have many rulings which we cannot implement unless we're knowledgeable, right? Like for example, Islam tells us to give charity. Now, how can we give charity if we don't have any money, right? So we need to know how to make money in order to give charity, right? So knowledge becomes extremely important. This is where commerce comes in, right? This is where economy comes in. This is why Muslims should learn about economy, right? Or how about when Islam says that you should help other people, right? There are many verses and hadith I can quote about this. And again, how are you going to help other people if you don't have anything to help them with, right? So this is why you need technology, you need medicine, right? All these other kind of things. So yeah, you will need knowledge for all of this. And this is why Prophet ﷺ says that people have to search knowledge, right? Because without knowledge, you cannot implement Islamic ethical rulings, right? So knowledge is a vital part of that. This is why students of knowledge are always praised. Students of knowledge are people who search about knowledge, and yes, this is Islamic knowledge, but this term of Islamic knowledge is extremely vast. It covers your whole life. It covers everything.
Salam everyone, this is the end of the first video. Inshallah, in the next video we will discuss, does it make sense to believe in heaven and hell or the unseen? I'll see you guys next time. If you guys like the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe and click bell icon for more. If you want to support the channel, then please consider becoming a patron or a YouTube member. See you guys next time, inshallah.